classroom. She's also been a mini-course puppeteer the last 2 years and has learned the power of puppetry for delivering social-emotional lessons. She aspires to become an article writer and an English high school teacher to serve her community. Minwa Musad is a 4th grade teacher in the Greenfield Union School District. She is passionate about the impact of education in the lives of her students. Minwa is dedicated to student success both inside and outside of the classroom. She believes that student success is built on meaningful relationships. Her classroom learning environment promotes fun, growth, and a sense of family. Her students feel important and purposeful at school. She aspires to one day teach students all across the world. Minwa and Gillet are also both social, emotional, ethics, and democratic education ambassadors, or SEED ambassadors, as part of our SEED Institute. The SEED Institute, which was developed as a partnership between the CSUB Department of Teacher Education and the Kegley Institute of Ethics, occurs annually and is composed of an intensive 3-day institute experience, poster presentations at the California Teachers Summit, and a year-long coaching cycle to help participants translate SEED competencies into their classrooms. We do not hand participants a curriculum, but build their capacity to create their own curriculum and pedagogy in response to real classroom, school, and community issues. Several of your breakout session facilitators are also SEED ambassadors today. At the core of their presentations, Minwa and Violetta will help illuminate the power of social emotional learning for 2 of our community's most marginalized populations, migrant students and Muslim students. And with that, I'll introduce Minwa Musad to start.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. When Dr. Beck had initially asked me to be here to speak on the experience of Muslim students in America, I couldn't say no. And the reason for that isn't because I didn't want to be here, but because I felt like it was too important to not talk about a community that I'm part of. All too often, we find ourselves thinking that there's going to be someone else who will speak up, but now's the time for each and every one of us to speak up and share our experiences. Today I'll be focusing on the experience of Muslim students in America, and I'm going to start by sharing some statistics with you. In 2017, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding conducted 2,400 interviews with parents all across the United States. And in those interviews, they found that 42% of Muslim students across the country found that they were being bullied due to their religion, whether it was through insults or physical assaults at school. The same could be said for 23% of Jewish students, 20% of Protestant students, and 6% of Catholic students. Among the Muslim students who were reported, 1 in 4 parents, or 10% of that total, reported that the bullying had included a teacher or a school official in some way. So to make this a little clearer, more Muslim students were being bullied by their teachers or school officials than Catholic students were being bullied by anyone at their school. So this is a very clear disproportion of discrimination. And due to this, a lot of these Muslim students were forced to enroll in different schools because of the harassment they faced every day from their peers and their teachers. So the people who were meant to protect these children and encourage them to be themselves were part of the problem. They were enabling others to continue their hurt that they were committing on these students. And though there are many reasons for why this bullying was happening, it's still part of the teacher's duty to protect these students. These circumstances exist in our country because of our current political climate. Now, it's a very repetitive cycle, as you can see. There were things that I faced as a young child with my family that I see happening all over again with a new generation of students. As a young child, I was primarily affected by the destruction that was caused in the 9/11 incident. And though I was only 5 at the time, the effects were very, very clear to me, especially with my family. I noticed almost immediately that the women in my family were not going out as much or leaving the home as often as they did before, and the men in my family were considering shaving off their beards. Now, I'm glad that they didn't because I've never seen my grandfather without his beard, and sorry, Gedu, I cannot imagine what that would be like. So please don't shave off your beard. So like I said, immediately I noticed there was a change in my family, but I didn't know that there was going to be a change in my social interactions at school. It didn't become clear to me until a few years later, and the reason for that is because a couple of years after, that's when I started to wear the hijab at school. Now, there's another thing that I need to clear up for everyone in the audience today. The reason that Muslim girls all over the world decide to wear the hijab is as varied as each and every one of our backgrounds. Even within the same family, people decide to make that choice based on different reasons as well. For instance, my mom started wearing the hijab when she was in kindergarten, and that's because she and her parents had recently immigrated to the US, and it was a cultural custom for young girls to wear the hijab. Still to this day, I get asked a similar question. I'll get to that in just a moment. But I'm very happy to see that more people are interested in knowing why we're making these choices and knowing why we wear the hijab. And that question that I get asked very often is, do I feel forced to wear it? Am I oppressed by my religion in wearing the hijab? And my answer to that is always no. Because the reason that I started wearing the hijab in 4th grade at that, 10 years old, was because a few weeks before I made that choice, my mother had passed away. And I felt that by wearing the hijab, I would be closer to her. So my answer is no, because I made that decision not based on my religion, but because of a personal commitment to my family. There were, like I said, I wanted to feel closer to my mother, and after I made that decision, that's when my life at school started to change, because the minute I put on the hijab, my classmates realized that I was in fact a Muslim. A lot of these things that happen at school occur during middle school. So we're going to fast forward a couple of years from 4th grade when I started wearing the hijab to 6th grade when it was more impactful in my social interactions at school. I've heard from many people in my community that in middle school is where they face a lot of hurt due to their religious decisions. And it usually starts with comments and escalates to more physical actions that occur. For instance, when I used to walk home from school with my sister, a group of kids would follow behind us and start calling out bin Laden. And that was hurtful because not only were they saying something that was untrue and calling us by a false name, they were associating us with a group of people that were causing harm. So to a 10-year-old and her 12-year-old sister, that was not an experience that we needed to have at school or walking home from school. From there, it started to escalate. I can vividly recall in 6th grade, I was in the restroom fixing up my hijab, and a girl came up behind me and pulled it off of my head. And she ran out of the restroom. I made a split-second decision to run after her so that I could get my hijab. After a solid minute of running after that girl and getting it back, I finally had it where it was meant to be. And for me, that was terrifying because I felt like if I didn't get it back, I would have to go the rest of my day without wearing it. And at that time, after wearing the hijab for 2 years, it was an integral part of my identity, and I didn't know what it would be like or who I would be without it. I was just like any of the other kids in my class. I loved going to school, my education was important to me, I played on the playground at recess, and my sister and I would ride the bus home or walk home depending on which school we were at. My father had his own business that he ran, and my mother, when she was alive, she took care of us at home. So we had a very generic American experience, but the only thing that made me different from my peers was that I was a Muslim, and a first-generation American at that. Now raise your hand if you're also a first-generation American in the crowd. There's a lot of us here. And there's something that we share. There's something that we get asked all the time, and it's a very annoying question. Where are you from? Now, as a first-generation American child growing up in the U.S., I constantly found myself having to choose between my two identities. I felt like I was an American. I was born here, I grew up here, all of my friends, my family, my education, it grew from my experience as an American. But yet I didn't feel like I was part of that group, that I was completely accepted as an American. On the other hand, when I would spend time with my ethnic group, my ethnic community, I still felt like I wasn't one of them. In that community, I was the token American. So I wasn't part of my nationality community, and I wasn't part of my ethnic community. Right? So there was a choice that I had to make. And my choice was I was trying to balance these two things. I was trying to merge them because it was still part of a singular identity. And yet I didn't feel completely accepted on either side. And trying to do this, trying to connect these pieces, was a very difficult challenge. Now there's a way that this affected me as a student in school. So in America, as a Muslim American student, I was faced with this decision every single year to choose between my religion and my education. I would constantly tell my teachers year after year that yes, I wouldn't be coming to school tomorrow, and the reason for that is because I'm celebrating a religious holiday. They would then ask, which holiday is that? I don't know if there's any holidays coming up tomorrow. Let me check my calendar, it's not there. So I would tell them, well, it's called Eid. And they would then say, well, what is this holiday? Now, if you've never heard of Eid, it's because it's not a national holiday in the United States. It's not completely accepted as one and put into our calendars for students to skip school and make that celebration. So I found myself having to decide, before we get there, Eid in itself is an Islamic holiday, and it's celebrated twice a year. One of those celebrations happens to fall during the academic school year. So I had to decide, was I going to stay in school and keep up with my education because it was very important to me, or was I going to skip school and celebrate with my family? And for most kids, that decision is extremely easy. I'm skipping school, I'm gonna go have fun with my family, I'm not gonna be there. But as I've continued to mention to you this morning, education is extremely important to me. So having to miss out on a single day of school was devastating. And it became even more devastating as I grew in my educational career, especially in high school and college, when missing a day of school could affect your entire career, your entire future from that point. So that was a difficult decision for me to make. But from there, I returned to school, 2 days later, and my friends would ask me, hey, where'd you go? And why is there a burn on your hand? Now, let me just explain that there was no burn on my hand, and my parents did not let me get a tattoo at 12, but at the time, my friends didn't know what henna was before. So those are the questions that I got asked. But this moment, where my peers were curious about why I was gone, and why there was something on my appearance that was different, is a crucial moment in the classroom, because this is where the teacher steps in. Do they allow their Muslim student to share their experience with their peers? Or do they gloss over it and continue with instruction as usual? The choice that the teacher makes is extremely critical because it demonstrates to their students how they should react when put in an opportunity to engage with someone in a different experience. So I want to share with you 2 stories of how teachers have tried to include students in their classroom or at their school, specifically Muslim students. When my brother was in 6th grade, he had a teacher who pulled him and my sister aside to have a conversation because he wanted to give them some advice. This teacher told them that as the only 2 Muslim students in their school of over 1,000 kids, they needed to set a good example to the rest of their peers because they were likely to be the only Muslims that these kids ever met. Now, I know this teacher had, positive intentions, and he was trying to make them feel included at their school with this conversation, but he went about it in a completely wrong way. He was setting an expectation for these 2 young students to represent an entire religion, and that's not something that they should be expected to do. Yet, it's an experience that a lot of students, especially Muslim students in America, share with each other. We're given that expectation to represent our faith. Now, that's not what we want to do with our Muslim students. We don't want to make them, the token Muslim or the person that we go to with all of these questions. We don't want them to feel like they're separated from their group of students, their peers. So I'm going to share a more positive experience with you. When my sister was in 6th grade, her teacher was amazingly inclusive with her. So at the time, they were studying world religions, and instead, knowing my sister, the teacher decided to have her read ahead and create her own presentation to share with the class. So a week later, my sister presented to her peers about Islam, and she spent that week very engaged in her education, because instead of rereading stuff that she already knows, she was able to tie it into her own experience and share that with her peers. A few weeks later, her teacher then let her create another presentation, but this time it was showing how similar the Abrahamic religions were. So with these two examples, we had one teacher who isolated their students. He reminded them why they were different from their peers, and he put a pressure on them to represent an entire faith. But in the other example, they acknowledged that the student had a different faith. They encouraged that student to share their experience with their peers, made that student feel special and important in the classroom, and also made her feel like she was part of a larger group by doing that secondary project where she taught her peers how they were similar. So instead of being one of them, the student became one of us. Now I share these two examples with you because it was a small choice that these teachers made, but it very much impacted the interactions that these students had at school. Now our last question that I want to leave you with is, why is it important to build a positive school climate? All students need to have access to a quality education, and that doesn't mean giving them the same exact assignment or the same materials. It means building them up from where they are so that they can all be successful by the end of that academic year that you have with them. Schools themselves have an influence to change hatred into unity and build a community where everyone is involved and everyone is included. As educators, we have a responsibility to make sure that these stereotypes are taught so we can change them and change our views on them, rather than having our students continue to perpetuate hatred in their society. We have to embrace the differences that we have and make sure that everyone feels included. Doesn't matter who we love or who we worship or what choices we make in our lives. I've gone my entire life being a representative of my faith, and I've kept myself open to answering questions and sharing my experiences with others. But Muslim students, just like any other students in the United States, they want to feel included and they want to have a successful career in education. Too much time has passed in our country for us to continue this perpetuation of hatred. We should be teaching our children to embrace cultural differences and respect others in school. And we can do that through social emotional learning. So from this point on, I'd like to thank you for giving me your time, and I'm going to move on to Violeta to share some experiences about migrant students in schools.
Oh, yeah.